When you think of video game mascots, who do you usually think of? When it comes to a company like Nintendo, you're probably thinking like Super Mario, but that wasn't really the case when Donkey Kong Country released.
For the first time in a while, another Nintendo IP had overcome Mario in popularity. Donkey Kong essentially became the new mascot of the Super Nintendo due to the massive success of Donkey Kong Country.
Of course, when a game is a massive success, a sequel is sure to follow, and about a year later, one did. Hi, hello, and salutations, my name is Duprific, and welcome to part 2 of my Donkey Kong Country retrospective, where today we'll be covering Donkey Kong Country 2. If you haven't seen the previous video, I've already covered everything we're going to be going over in that one, so if you haven't watched it yet, probably should. But if you're just here for Donkey Kong Country 2, or you just have no interest in watching the other one, then welcome in. Enjoy the show.
As mentioned earlier, Donkey Kong Country was a massive success for Nintendo and Rare. For the first time since the console wars had started, Nintendo reclaimed their market dominance that Sega had taken over, and a large part of that was because of Donkey Kong Country. Obviously, talks of a sequel were underway, but Rare wasn't sure if a new game would be just as well received. There'd become a growing fear within the team that DKC owed all of its success to the fact that it was a game starring a pre-established character and the fact that its graphic style was new. They were worried about being a one-hit wonder. There was much debate about what to do, even at one point considering just going down the safe route and just making more Donkey Kong Country.
Of course, anyone who knows anything about Rare at this time knows that they never like to play things safe, especially with sequels. So naturally, they took this as an opportunity to prove that they weren't just one-hit wonders, that Donkey Kong Country wasn't just a success because it only had Donkey Kong and was in 3D, but instead was an actually good game.
As you'll see throughout this video, a lot of the decisions made were in the spirit of specifically not playing things safe. It's a common energy that runs throughout the entire game.
But yeah, I think that's enough preamble and stage prepping. Without further ado, let's get into the review.
Donkey Kong Country 2 released almost a year to the date after Donkey Kong Country in November of 1995. Nowadays, that would be a rather concerning turnaround time for a new major sequel, but you have to remember that this was still during a time when a few people in a small garage was not an unreasonable size for a video game studio. Still though, that's not to discredit how impressive it was that they were able to get the game out so quickly. Remember, these aren't real-time 3D graphics they're working with here. These are 3D images being transformed into sprite tiles, and render times were not as fast as they are nowadays. Any one of these small assets you see in the game probably took days to weeks to render out, and if they messed up on an asset or needed to change a level, that was more time waiting for an asset to render.
The amount of patience it took to make this type of project at that point in time is very admirable. I mean, I can get impatient just waiting for my food to microwave, but I guess that's really what just made Rare so special. They were committed to not just pushing themselves forward, but the industry as well.
Donkey Kong Country 2 on its release was met with massive praise from critics and audience alike. The game was yet another success for Rare and proved to them that yes, it was their own skill that made Donkey Kong Country popular and not the brand or the tech.
Of course, as you probably already knew, I wasn't around during those days, so my personal journey with this game is obviously going to be a bit different than some of the other videos people have made about this game. Although, I did grow up playing this game on a Super Nintendo.
Your brain probably just did a kickflip there. Yeah, so I grew up with the Game Boy Color version of Donkey Kong Country, but even though I had a Game Boy Advance and it would have made more sense for me to have grown up with the Game Boy Advance version of Donkey Kong Country 2, no, once again, in the wonderfully strange way my life is, I just happen to have a Super Nintendo and the only game I had for it was Donkey Kong Country 2.
You wanna know what the worst part about this is? First off, I have no idea where my actual cartridge is, which is pretty strange because I'm pretty good at keeping track of all where my games went. But secondly, I did not like this game as a kid, and it wasn't for any reason why a kid normally wouldn't like the game, like it being too hard or just not engaging them. No, I didn't like this game because Donkey Kong wasn't in it.
Yeah, apparently I was willing to discard an entire game's value because Donkey Kong wasn't in it. It's not even that I disliked Diddy or Dixie, I actually really liked them. It was purely because I couldn't play with Donkey Kong in the game.
Obviously, I don't feel the same about the game nowadays. As you'll see throughout this video, I absolutely adore this game. I just think it was funny that I was the dumbass Rare was afraid of.
Donkey Kong has been Kong-napped. Not too long after the defeat of King K. Rool, Diddy Kong receives a mysterious letter from none other than the Crooked Crocodile himself, claiming that he has Donkey Kong hostage on Crumbling Isle. Seeing as he has no other options, and also wanting to make up for the Banana Horde blunder, he decides he'll travel over to Crumbling Isle, defeat Captain K. Rool. Yeah, by the way, he's captain now, and he'll prove once and for all that he's fully capable of being his own video game hero and not just some sidekick. Of course, he can't do it by himself, so with the help of his girlfriend Dixie and a few familiar and new faces, they make their way over to save their big buddy.
It's pretty interesting that Diddy Kong's desire to prove himself a hero mirrors that of Rare's goal with this game. Although I'm fairly certain that was not a coincidence.
But yeah, like I said, Diddy Kong isn't alone in this adventure. He's getting help from the returning Cranky Kong and Funky Kong, and from the newcomers Wrinkly Kong, Swanky Kong, and Dixie Kong. Occasionally, the pair will run into a Kremling named Clubba, and he's how you get into the secret world, but I didn't do any of that this time. Cranky Kong is the same lovable grumpy geezer as he was in the last game, pretty much serving the same purpose, giving you hints on where secrets are throughout levels. Funky Kong also returns with the same functionality he had before, allowing you to revisit previous worlds. Wrinkly Kong is our first newcomer to the country series. She runs the college, that's college with a K, and also is Cranky's wife. At the college, you can spruce up on info about the game, but more likely than not, you'll be stopping by just to save your game. Yeah, that's right, Candy Kong isn't in this one. Sorry to anyone who was expecting their sex appeal ape to come back. You freaks. No, the job of saving the game is now Wrinkly's responsibility, and boy howdy does she know how to enterprise on this opportunity. In the previous Donkey Kong Country, saving was completely free. This was probably due to the fact that save stations were just so infrequently and sporadically distributed. In Donkey Kong Country 2, saving is still free on your first visit to the college in a world, that is. After that, you gotta fork up 2 coins every time you want to save. This change wouldn't be so bad if save stations appeared at the same point of progress in every point of the world, but no, they're still spaced out pretty unevenly, so it makes this change sting a little bit more. Not a fan of it personally, and I think a majority of people agree on that. Swanky Kong's our next newcomer. Unlike Wrinkly Kong, he's not replacing a character, but instead actually adding his own functionality to this series. He runs a game show you can participate in, and if you win, he'll give you a life as a reward. I like his design, even if he's clearly just Donkey Kong's model in a funny suit. Diddy Kong returns from Donkey Kong Country 1 and he plays pretty much exactly the same as he did in that game. He's still quick and can stop on a dime, but can't take down heavy enemies. Finally, we have Dixie Kong. As mentioned earlier, Dixie Kong is Diddy Kong's girlfriend, and she's filling in the role that Diddy Kong left with his big promotion to main character. She's not as fast as Diddy Kong is, but she makes it up with her ability to fly through the air for a brief period of time by spinning her ponytail around, thus making her more reliable for trickier platforming sections. Other than that though, she actually plays pretty similarly to Diddy Kong, which means she's the more popular character to play as given her more consistent reliability. Sorry, Diddy Kong.
You may have noticed I never mentioned Donkey Kong. That's just because he's just flat out unplayable. Yep, not a secret unlockable character you can get later on. He is just MIA this entire game. But, I mean, that makes sense. They wanted this game to stand out from the predecessor, and what better way to do that than giving the main character slot to the sidekick of the last game and leaving the main hero out in the cold.
Of course, the change in main cast isn't the only thing that's different about the way Donkey Kong Country 2 plays. The tag team system has been given a major upgrade since the last game. If you press the A button on the controller, your partner will jump on you for a piggyback ride. When carrying the partner, you can throw them at interactables to activate them or use their invincibility to grab objects just out of reach in danger's way. Just don't throw them on brambles. That'll kill them. This completely changes the dynamic in how the player navigates and interacts with the world. It sounds like a small thing when described, but trust me when I say that this is probably one of the best additions in this game. Now the Dual Kongs truly feel like they have a sense of synchronicity, and the developers use this ability pretty liberally throughout the game's levels. Speaking of which, this is another way in which Donkey Kong Country 2 sets itself apart from its predecessor. In Donkey Kong Country 1, I and many people have described the level design as safe. There isn't too much experimenting going on outside of a handful of levels, and while I personally didn't mind this, it was and still is a major point of criticism of the first game by most people. Donkey Kong Country 2 goes out of its way to fix this issue. First of all, the level variety and theming is way more expansive than in the first game. In that one, you mainly saw locales you would normally see in a jungle island, with the exception being the big factory and the pirate ship at the end. In this game, you start off on Gangplank Galleon, the last level of the first game, but now it's a whole world and it looks completely different. The ship is decaying and massive holes left in its structure from the battle with DK have clearly done it in. There are a lot of dangerous jumps to make here now, with the only saving grace being these hooks for the Kongs to catch themselves on over massive pits straight into treacherous waters. You also have a volcano theme, a swamp theme, a carnival theme, a beehive theme. Fun fact, it was on this playthrough that I realized that the Zingers were actually a part of the Kremling army and not just a natural hazard on Donkey Kong Isle. You have a haunted mansion theme, a floating bramble garden theme, a castle dungeon theme, a way more interesting cave theme, this one is one of my favorites, and even a floating mechanical ship theme. That's not even mentioning all the different combinations of the themes as well. Things have gotten a lot more perilous.
Perilous is how I would describe Diddy Kong's adventure in this game. Last game, they had the home field advantage. They know the island like the back of their hand. But we're not on DK Island anymore. We're in enemy territory. The enemy territory. The home of the Kremlings.
To further accentuate my point, let's do a bit of compare and contrasting with the water levels from both games. As a refresher, this is what a water level looked like in Donkey Kong Country 1. Now this is a water level in Donkey Kong Country 2. There's a very stark tone difference in the way the game presents its themes. The first game had more of a focus on keeping things immersive and ambient, which was what helped it stand out against its contemporaries that didn't really have any concern on making the world feel believable. Now, it's not like Donkey Kong Country 2 doesn't try to make its world believable, just now it's not too shy about incorporating more video game aspects into the levels. Donkey Kong Country 2 is a lot harder than the first one as well, but the difficulty scaling is a lot more smooth throughout. That is until the final two worlds, where suddenly there's a big spike and you're being thrown new elements in the middle of a world with no time to adjust to them. These last two worlds are a bit of a sore spot in my eyes. Regardless though, this game is bigger and its bite is way more lethal.
But what's a rare game without its collectibles and secrets? Don't worry, this game's got the goods on that front as well.
Returning from the first game are the Kong letters. As always, collect all of them for a life. And that's all that returns from the first game. Yep, the Animal Buddy statues have been cut from the series and turned for these new exciting collectibles. First we have the banana coins. These are scattered throughout the levels for you to collect. Some of them are just out in the open on the path, some you have to go a bit out of your way to grab, and some are hidden inside objects. As I mentioned way earlier in the video, this game now has a currency system, and the banana coins are what you have to spend to get access to services that were free in the first game. Next we have the creme coins. You get these from bonus stages hidden throughout the levels, kinda like how the first game had hidden bonus stages in its levels as well, but these are actually way more engaging than those. For instance, there's an actual objective to these now. You don't just accidentally stumble into a single screen and grab the bananas or hit the cycling animal statues. Secondly, these are way more accessible and there's better indication that you're near one of these secret rooms. So there's less of a feeling of randomly stumbling into one and more of an excitement from figuring out how to get into it. Crab coins are the currency you have to give to Clubba to access the secret world in this game. I never had enough for any of the Clubba checks, so I never actually ended up visiting the secret world in this playthrough. Finally, we have the hero coins. These are shaped in the DK logo and have been scattered across the game by Cranky for Diddy to find. Most of these are pretty tricky to track down, but some of them are way too easy. There's only one in each level. I feel sorry for the poor soul who goes out of the way to get these every playthrough, because some of them are only available through the end of level item roulette, and this thing can be really difficult to time. These don't really do much except give you bragging rights. I don't even think you need to collect all these to gain access to the secret ending. You only need to grab the ones in the Lost World, and for that all you need are the creme coins. It really is just there as an additional neat bonus.
While the animal statues may have been cut, the animal buddies make their return, and they're better than ever.
Returning for the first game are Rambi, Ongard, and Squawks.
Oh goody, Squawks is here.
Yeah, that's right. Winky and Espresso didn't make the jump over, but that's alright because I think the new ones totally make up for their absence. First we have Squitter the Spider. This dude shoots webs as projectiles, but also plays them to create floating platforms. Despite him being a scary spider, he's actually one of my favorites in this game. Next we have Rattly the Rattlesnake. He appears pretty infrequently, but he serves pretty much the same purpose Winky did in the first game, giving you a higher jump. Which makes him better than Winky is that he has a high jump which you charge by holding the A button. In fact, even the returning animals have also been given new functionality. Rambi and Ongard have both been given a new charge ability, making them even more useful than they already were. Squawks now actually participates in the game and has an ability where he shoots eggs? Seeds? I can't quite tell what these are supposed to be. Either way, he's helpful now. Congrats on graduating from being the worst. In fact, Squawks actually appears in some of the most beautiful levels of the game, and you often use him a lot for flying. Next we have Quawks. He's like Squawks, but he can't defend himself, and he's constantly falling slowly when you're riding him. Since his gimmick is pretty context-specific, he doesn't really appear all that often. Then we have Clapper the Seal. He's able to make water cold in levels where the water is too hot to swim in. He's less of a power and more of a level tool, but I thought I'd include him here anyways. And finally, we have Glimmer the Anglerfish.
So you know that one level in DKC1 where Squawks flashes you with his bright-ass light bulb and gives you a seizure? Well, take that level, put it underwater, and instead of a bird, it's an anglerfish. I don't like this one.
The animal pals also now appear in levels you wouldn't expect to see them. Well, all of them except Ongard and Angler. They're both fish. Fish can't breathe on land. A lot of the times I was pretty surprised which buddy would turn up where, although DKC2 made them a lot harder to find. In fact, I only found Ongard in one level this time around. That's okay though, because DKC2 treats the animal pals pretty differently than DKC1 did. Instead of being purely used as a power-up, now every once in a while you'll come across a level where you play as the animal buddy. That's right, every rideable pal in the game now gets at least one level to themselves. I think treating the animal pals as their own characters aiding the Kongs makes them feel a lot more unique than just simply making the power-up you can find in the field every once in a while.
Now I want to make a point to actually talk about the Kremlings in this video. I intentionally did not do so in the last video because I think this game is where they truly become iconic.
Now don't get me wrong, the Kremlings in the first game were definitely still pretty memorable, but they still felt like traditional video game enemies. Most of the variety appear in the very beginning and not many new types are introduced past that first level. In DKC2, not only are new ones introduced pretty frequently in each world, but their tricky and ruthless side truly shines here. In the first level, we see quite a few we've seen from the first game, but then we stumble upon one hiding in a barrel that shocks the player and potentially gets a kill on them. Hiding in barrels is probably one of the nastier moves Rare made with them because the last game trained players to trust pretty much every barrel they see. DKC2 immediately throws your absolute trust in barrels at your face. Now there's the possibility any generic barrel could be hiding an enemy. It's to demonstrate that when in Kremlin country, you need to be on your toes at all times. Then we have these guys with the big dual swords that are really hard to avoid, and the crunches patrolling the perimeters are now way scarier here because unless you're carrying something or have an animal buddy, you can't kill them because no one on your team is heavy enough. You'll be racing them on a roller coaster, dodging spirits throwing obstacles at you, they'll run at you inside exploding barrels. Hell, even climbing isn't safe because these guys will be waiting for you on ropes to get a surprise drop on you. The absolute no-shame bullcrap tactics of the Kremlings in this game are what I think people remember them for the most.
But the variety of its enemies is not the only thing DKC2 does better with its enemies than the first game. The bosses have also been massively improved.
In the first game, the bosses, with the exception of the final one, were all pretty lame. They felt like they were out of obligation over anything else. It didn't help that most of them were just big versions of standard enemies. DKC2's bosses are all completely unique enemies and for the most part do a pretty good job at keeping true to the overarching theme of the world. These are some legitimately fun bosses. They're not all winners though. The Queen Zinger boss fight is extremely frustrating due to the fact that you have to hit specifically the Stinger. Unlike that, later on in the game, we fight the ghost of the boss we killed in the first world. Yep, the bosses have all gotten a major upgrade. Well, that is except for the final one. Yeah, the Captain K. Rool fight falls a little flat for me. The first game's K. Rool battle was intense, while this feels a lot less involved. Maybe it's because we're not actually jumping on him and instead throwing his ammo back into his gun, so the damage feedback isn't as satisfying.
Also, the music in this fight isn't anywhere near as cool as Gameplay Galleons was.
Other than the music in the final boss, I'd say the rest of it is just as good, if not even better at times than the original games. It fully leans into the ambient side of things. At times it can get a little too ambient, and there are certain tracks that I have trouble remembering, but they are far outnumbered by the sheer amount of amazing pieces. Anyways, getting back on track here, let's send Captain K. Rool packing. In the end, DK ends up stealing the win from Diddy Kong, but hey, DK wouldn't have been set free if he hadn't journeyed through Kremlin country. There is a secret ending that you can get if you beat the Lost World, but I wasn't really too concerned on that front, so we only have the original ending to go by.
And that was Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy Kong's Quest. There's a very clear reason why out of the first two games, this one is the more popular one. It experiments way more with level design and even goes as far as combining mechanics together to create some really tricky platforming. While this game is way more difficult than the first one, it's way more balanced throughout. Really, the only jump in difficulty happens at the very end. This could have easily just been more DKC, but they went out of their way to ensure that Diddy Kong's adventure stood out from Donkey Kong's, ensuring that both don't overshadow one another. It's bigger, it's got a lot darker of a tone. Overall, it's a really good game and a worthy successor to Donkey Kong Country 1. If you have somehow never played this game, I highly recommend you do so. It's great. Yeah, with that said though, I think it's about time we start looking forward to the future. Next time on the Donkey Kong Country Theme Marathon, we'll be talking about a game that I've actually never beaten. In fact, the only Donkey Kong Country game I've never beaten, despite my multiple playthroughs of it. That's right, next time we'll be taking a look at the infamous Donkey Kong Country 3. But until then, have a great rest of your day. Goodbye!